Hey there, welcome. It is good to have you with me tonight. I just about didn't want to show up today. It is such a beautiful evening where I'm at. It's like, do I really have to go to work? But yes, I do. Yes, I do. So here I am for you. We're still going to do a really good job on this one tonight. I'm glad you're with me. I hope you're having a beautiful day as well. Just a reminder that for those who watch this as the replay, and even if you're watching this live with me, hop on over to the replay link that you'll receive tomorrow and hit that like button, drop a comment, share it, and be sure to subscribe to my channel so you become aware of when I post new videos. So good to have you there with me as well. All right, now, if you've been hanging around with me for any length of time, I've actually got two missions in my business as far as my iridology work goes. The first is to mentor practitioners who are struggling in their businesses because they spend their own time unpaid and after hours creating client programs. And number two is to teach the truth about iridology and its proper application in a wellness practice. And that's really what we are going to be focusing on today. I want to share with you something that I recently saw on social media. I see so much of this, and it's enough to kind of make me a little crazy. Just saying, somebody had posted an eye like this and said, "Tell me what's wrong." And it's like, well, yeah. Doing that would be absolutely 100% diagnosing, but it would be diagnosing with absolutely no background information. It's like if you were to walk into a doctor's office, plunk yourself down in the exam room, and just sit there in the chair, and he can see you, but he's not asked you any questions yet, and you're asking him, "Tell me what's wrong." Would any doctor actually do that? Do you know of any doctor who, without even asking a question, would try to diagnose a patient? I personally don't. There may be some out there. I hope there aren't. When we look at an iris photo like this, we need to be aware that it's a very poor quality photo. It's a beautiful photo. I'm not debating that one little bit, but it's a poor quality photo as far as doing an iris analysis goes, right? So we have lots of light reflections, right? The fiber structure is blurry. The image is literally too far away. It's too small of an image for us to see the details. And even if we were to blow this up, it is likely a low enough resolution done with a smartphone. So probably 15 megapixels or less, which means that if we try to blow this up, the image is going to be pixelated and is going to be even more blurry. So we need to be able to see the eye clearly in order to do a valid assessment. If we can't see the eye clearly, we are not going to be able to do any good here. Now, let me show you the posts that went with this. Somebody posted in response to that image, "This looks like an allergic constitution with lots of inflammation. Remove from her diet any dairy products, gluten, sugar, or processed foods as much as possible. Give her easy to digest foods, organic fruit and vegetables, nuts and nut butters, good protein like fish and tofu, hummus, tahini, and a little honey if you need to sweeten something. You could also give her banana and blueberry smoothies made on almond milk with some protein powder. This should help." We don't even know how old this person is. We don't know what the symptoms are. We've only seen eyes, and we've got whoever is the admin on this site, and actually I've blocked out names so that we are not making, putting anybody in a bad light, but giving recommendations without having some background information with only looking at eyes is a serious, serious mistake. So Tessa, you can do photos with a smartphone if you know what you're doing. They will never be as good as if they are done with a professional iridology camera. When I teach my course, I have all of my students start with their smartphone. And again, I teach them how to get decent photos, but you don't have control of the ambient light. You're not going to have control of light reflections. There's going to be a lot of variables that your smartphone won't let you control. So the photos won't be as good as they could be. Now, the other thing is, if you are taking their images with their smartphone, right, you also have that person in your space. So you can look at their eyes directly and with a handheld magnifier to get more details. Okay, so this is a starting place, but it's not where you finish up as a professional. So the anonymous participant then said, interesting, how long could it take to see any improvements? We have no information on which to base this answer. And admin said, anonymous participant, what sort of symptoms does she have? It's a little late to be asking that question, in my humble opinion. It continues, no real symptoms per se, but she is pale with dark circles under her eyes all the time. She also catches every single cold or bug you can think of. That makes me think she could have a low immune system at the moment. No rashes, no trouble with her bowels, no vomiting or headaches. Author says, if it could be an allergy, is there a way to find out what type? Or sorry, that's anonymous participant again. Oops, sorry, hit the button there. And again, anonymous participant, you can have allergy tests, but I wouldn't recommend that at the moment if it's just a poor immune function. Change her diet first, as I recommended, and see how she goes. It should make a big difference. You can also give her some zinc and vitamin C and echinacea in child's form to help build up her immune system. So as a practitioner, I think it's irresponsible to give recommendations without having the case history and combining the case history with what you see in the eyes in order to then understand, where is this person coming from? What information are the eyes giving us on top of that? And how do we proceed from here? So that's just an example of someone not fully diagnosing, because she said it looks like an allergic constitution. She didn't say she has allergies, right? But it's close enough that it makes me uncomfortable, and it kind of gives iridologists a bit of a bad rap here. So let's dive into an assessment here and see, I used to be a Jensening iridologist. 30 years ago, I jumped ship and went constitutional. And so back then, I would have also said a whole bunch of things about this eye. Like I would have said, he's got an adrenal kidney problem now, got a problem in his brain right now, got another problem in his brain, got a problem in the top of his lung over here. We've got another problem in his testicle right here. And I would have pronounced these as current problems. Let me tell you, as a constitutional iridologist, how this would have read instead. Oh, and I would have said if he did enough cleansing, he could get rid of these discolored patches in his eyes. All right. And there's enough shading here again. I would have said kidney problems right now. What we know with constitutional iridology is the irides teach us what the inherent predispositions are. The buzzword that's out there nowadays is epigenetics, right? We have all of this genetic coding, and it can respond very quickly based on nutritional status and stress. Very quickly, like you can turn a gene on or off within just moments. And then if something else happens, the opposite can happen to that exact same gene, right? It can happen very quickly. We know that things like this pigment that is in here is not the result of toxic exposure or toxic accumulation. This is the result of genetic cues. His body is telling us genetically that an organ wants to create problems for other organs. So this is a male in his early 30s. His chief complaint was that his stomach never feels good. He has frequent episodes of heartburn. His energy is unstable and not reliable. In his diet, he has lots of good quality whole foods. He eats a lot of good quality proteins and vegetables. He has 2 to 3 cups of coffee per day and an active lifestyle. So in assessing his irides, what do I see here? The white in his irides, so this little bit of white that's here, we've got some clouding here. It doesn't matter where this white is sitting at this stage of the assessment. The white in his irides shows that he has a predisposition to being over acid systemically. Now, is he over acid systemically? His symptoms would suggest that. So when we are looking at these eyes, again, we need to think of these inherent predispositions in terms of epigenetics. how is he treating his body? How is that making his body respond? What do his eyes tell us about his genetic constitution? Because we inherit many genetic possibilities, right? How we nourish our bodies, deal with stress, all of that, how we allow ourselves to rest, all of this will determine how our genes will behave. So when we look at this young man's eyes, I can call him young because I'm old enough to be his mother. I'm not his mother, by the way. He's got this darker area. Now you might see this as whiter, but I want you to notice that it isn't as white as what we see here. This is actually into shades of gray. So this is considered to be darker. This suggests that genetically his stomach wants to underfunction, that his stomach doesn't like secreting digestive acids very well. Is his stomach secreting digestive acids? We don't know until we ask him. We ask him more about symptoms, right? These, again, these brownish spots that are sitting in his eyes suggest that his liver and or pancreas don't want to do their jobs properly. In all of these cases, there are things we can do to help his body function better within its genetic structure. There's a lot of other indicators in the eyes, but as far as this client's current symptoms of stomach never feels good, those are actually the most important markers we see. So we need to use these markers to help us ask questions before we ever come up with a recommendation, and we never ever name a disease process. Now, his doctor had given him, or had prescribed for him proton pump inhibitors without ever testing his stomach, which was very interesting. So I recommended to this fellow that the first thing I would do, because he was eating vegetables, really nice amounts of vegetables, he's eating good quality proteins, I suggested that he cut out the coffee, because coffee is not great for the stomach lining. Right? Now, his doctor never told him to cut it out. And it was funny because when he came to see me the first time, he told all his friends he was coming because his wife told him he should come. Right? His wife is an excellent client of mine. She's been a client for a couple of years. And he was coming because she said, you need to go see Judith. She could help you fix this. And I had already recommended that she stop coffee for various reasons. And he came in and he says, he sat down before he even said hello. He said, I just want you to know I'm not giving up coffee. Okay. I'm not going to push back on that. So we get to looking at his eyes and I'm saying, well, this, and I show him his eye photos. And I say, this tells me that genetically your stomach's not strong. And here's how coffee is affecting that. So I would encourage you to do an experiment for 10 days. Cut out the coffee just for 10 days. See how it feels. Then go back to drinking the coffee and see how that feels. And then you can decide whether you want to cut it out or not. So he did that. And we also, while he was doing that, I suggested, we maybe should give your stomach a little support here. We should maybe add some hydrochloric acid to you, because even with cutting out coffee, you still might not be able to secrete quite enough. And so I said, here's how I would suggest using hydrochloric acid in order to support your digestive processes. Well, he felt changes within the first week. His stomach felt so much better, and he's maintained those changes. Now I've just been helping him and his wife. They are expecting their first baby in about a month. We're very excited. And so he came in with her for one of the little prenatal checks that I like to do. And he said, oh, by the way, I haven't had coffee since I was here. You told me to test, and I had asked him to test putting it back in. He said, even back then, I didn't see the reason to do that because I felt so good. He says, and I still feel great. So I assessed his irides. I was able to see where the weak links were, couple that with his symptoms, and without ever naming a disease process, was able to start making recommendations that would be beneficial for him. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, give me a makes sense in the comments box. Let me know that that gave you information you can use. Belize is saying, yes, makes wonderful sense, says Tasha. Fantastic, wonderful, wonderful. We're going to look at some more cases here. This is a little boy. He was 10 years old when he first came to see me. Again, an unusual case from the perspective of both of his parents came to every appointment, which is highly irregular. I thought it was brilliant. It's an intact family, so everybody was getting the very same information, and it was so good. This little boy was being brought in because he was being evaluated first by the school psychologist and then by medical doctors for ADD, ADHD. Now, what I want to tell you right here might be a bit of a showstopper for you. Every person I've ever worked with who's had a diagnosis of ADD or ADHD has had these rings in their eyes. Now, that doesn't necessarily go the other way. Every person who has these rings does not necessarily have ADD or ADHD. These rings increase the risk or the possibility that the person will have ADD, ADHD. Tessa says, I've noticed also, I myself have them, as do my children. All right, there you go. There you go. Now, when we see these markers, they suggest that this person burns through their B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium very quickly. Very quickly. Like we could literally give them a fire hose with these vitamins and their body would burn them up just that fast. I'm kidding, of course. We would never do that to anybody. When these people are properly nourished, Felice is asking which markers, these rings that are going around the eye here, Felice, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly. When these people are properly nourished, they actually do very well. They like to have to-do lists. They like to be able to check things off. And the to-do list helps them stay focused. Otherwise, they can be a bit scattered, working a little bit on this thing, a little bit on that, a little bit on this, and then a little bit on that, and a little bit on this. And so they like their list. It helps them stay focused, but they do need to have really solid nutrition on a regular basis. And so with that, that is where we needed to be focusing with this client. Questions I needed to ask this family, things like, what's the diet like? Right? It was usually like white flour pancakes with pancake syrup or a boxed breakfast cereal for breakfast. They would pack lunches for school because we don't have a lunch program where I live. And it was usually white bread, processed ham, processed cheese, a fruit roll-up thing, and a beverage box that had the sugar colored flavored water stuff. I hesitate to call it a juice box because it's not even juice, right? Not that juice would be any better. Evening meal was usually pretty much on the go, a quick pasta or a drive-through, because two children in the family, both very active with extracurricular, and it was often parents divide and conquer. One parent take this child, the other parent take that child, make sure they get fed, get them to their commitments, right? So it's not a really great diet for someone who burns through their B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium. And so with this information, then we were able to construct an eating program that actually benefited the whole family. And I was very clear in teaching the parents that this was going to be an eating program that the whole family could do and probably should do. Right. So from there, it was things like, let's get some protein at breakfast. Can we do eggs in some form? I really didn't care if they were scrambled, poached, boiled, or made into an omelet, or maybe it was egg bites, right? Making the little egg cup things that you bake in the oven and then you can freeze them and defrost them really quickly. Let's get a few of those into him. If we're going to do a bread, let's make sure it's a multi-grain sprouted grain bread. Family was totally on board. Rather than doing, if you're going to do pancakes, can we do a whole grain pancake with some real butter and some real maple syrup and a couple of eggs with that, or some sausages or something, bacon even, just anything, but look at the ingredients and make sure it's a clean product. For lunch, that was an easy swap out. Let's do a sprouted multi-grain bread. Let's do the best quality sandwich meat you can get, better even if it was leftovers from the night before, like some chicken or some roast beef. Put in real cheese instead of processed cheese. Can we send an apple or some fruit? Maybe a little box of cut up fruit. Could we get him a snazzy water bottle, a really cool water bottle, and just have him take water as his beverage, right? So we got them doing that. For the evening, since it's a busy family, I can't say to the mom and dad, and both parents are working full time, I can't say, well, you need to take an hour and a half and prepare a gourmet dinner and somehow wedge that in around the kids' activities. So it was more like, do you have a slow cooker? Yeah, we sure do. Could you use that? Could you make a homemade lasagna with lots of meat and throw some extra veggies into that lasagna and buy a boxed salad to go with that? That was very doable because that you can do that in a slow cooker really easily. Could you do a homemade soup or a stew for the winter months? In the summer, could it be, again, buy the big box salads, buy a roasted chicken or roast your own chickens on the weekend and just do some cold chicken and a big salad? There's lots of things that we did. So we really worked to reconfigure the eating habits. Of course, we introduced appropriate supplements. And with this, what we did is just kept this little boy chugging along. He was in the 5th grade when I saw him. His parents avoided putting him on Ritalin for the 6th grade, and his teachers were quite impressed. He was doing much better with being attentive and with not being disruptive. But when they got to 7th grade, that's where we jump. Here we jump from elementary school to what we would consider junior high. Some places might call it middle school. The parents were very concerned, and so they decided to put him on Ritalin at that point, and it broke my heart because he was making such good progress. I think he could have been very successful in junior high and senior high with excellent nutrition. Really think he could have been. Some questions that I asked him were things like, what are his sleep patterns like? Because that will tell me a little bit more about how his body's handling B, C, calcium, and magnesium. How does he handle stress, frustration, and anxiety? What is his favorite learning method? Now, when we're working with kids that have ADD or ADHD, they are usually kinesthetic learners. They need to involve their body, right? So if we're working on memorizing multiplication tables, to have him sit at a table and do a worksheet, not going to fly. To have him recite multiplication tables by rote, not going to fly. Give him a basketball and have him bounce it in rhythm to reciting the multiplication tables. He's all over it. Give him math manipulatives where he can say, I've got 2 groups of, he's grade 5, way beyond 2 times 2. 2 groups of 2 blocks, count them up. That gives me 4. But give him something to do. But don't stick him in a desk and make him sit down. That's not going to work. You know, have him be one of the primary helpers for phys ed class to carry the gym equipment, right? I actually worked with him many years ago. He's probably graduated high school by now. The worst thing that he could do would be to go and be an accountant, right? But put him into a horticulture program where he's learning about landscaping and he's going to do hardscaping or just landscaping and tree pruning and things like that. And then let him get out there and work on a team, right? Or put him in school to be a phys ed teacher where he's doing phys ed with the kids all day, every day. Yeah, those are the kinds of things that he would be really great at because they use his body. So we would also want to ask questions because of other things we see in his eyes about liver and pancreas. Because with ADD, ADHD, we almost always see imbalanced blood sugars, right? And that's where they crave the carbs. They want the sweets. They're looking for the junk food. And so we want to ask about those kinds of symptoms. And this is where having anatomy and physiology under your belt, so you understand what symptoms would a pancreas that's not happy create, what symptoms can a liver that's not happy create, how does that clash, where do we need to go from there? Right. Is this all making sense? Tessa, I love that you're taking notes. This is so good, so good. Is this all making sense? If it is, let me know. Tessa's saying yes, because she's going to apply this to her family. I love it. Felice is saying yes, and Julianne is saying yes. So love it. So good. So when we're doing an iris assessment, we're not just looking at the eyes and listing off a list of markers we see and a generic list of what it could mean and a generic list of what we want to do about it. We always want to look at the eyes in the context of what are the client's symptoms. We want to marry that to understand what further questions should we be asking. And that's going to give us the information we need to decide what are the nutritional recommendations, what are the supplements we want to use. All right, here's another case. A woman in her mid-20s came to me wanting to get pregnant. She'd already had an ectopic pregnancy and had, after that, no luck conceiving for a couple of years. She'd gained a significant amount of weight. And when she went to the doctor assessed her as having polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so knowing that that's what the doctor had recommended, it kind of opened it up for me to be a little more relaxed in what I was saying. Because when I see a woman who's had an ectopic pregnancy and whose waist measurement is over 36 inches, and I've known her for many years and I saw her weight balloon, I was then able to ask, tell me about your periods, tell me about your menstrual cycles, how often are they happening, what is your flow like? And so with that, I was able to go, yeah, I totally agree with your doctor. If I had the ability to diagnose and name this, I would call it PCOS. Now, what did that mean? What it meant, we see several markings in her eyes as well that suggest a likelihood of PCOS. We've got lots of lacunae in her eyes. That automatically increases the risk of endocrine metabolic imbalances, right? Doesn't guarantee them, but it increases the risk. Again, remember, we need to ask, what has she done that would trigger this risk showing up, right? And I don't mean that in an accusatory way, but understanding her diet and her lifestyle helps me to understand what we're going to need to do, what we're going to need to change to get the correction we're looking for. Notice she's also got a little bit of the ring. Now this is frontally lit, which means it hides the rings, but she's got a bit of a ring here. So from there, I know that she burns through her B, C, and calcium and magnesium as well. So with this set of eyes, we can also often see markings specifically in an ovary area or a liver marking that's going to have an impact on what we're talking about as well. So with her, we talked a whole lot about her diet. So again, we're looking for symptoms. We're looking for what markers give us more information. What questions does that mean we want to ask to get even more information? And that was those rings going around the eyes. Okay, so she's got a little bit of one right here. So this woman actually does struggle with anxiety and depression. And she, her menstrual cycles were getting further and further apart, right? The markings that suggest the endocrine imbalance don't always mean PCOS. They just mean endocrine, which could be pushing her, let me rephrase that, could mean she has a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, which if you know anything about PCOS, is best friends with type 2 diabetes, right? So when we saw all of that, we instantly knew what we needed to do. Her diet had really become atrocious. It was a lot of refined carbohydrates. There wasn't a lot that was healthy in her diet. There were virtually no vegetables, very little protein. So we had to do a significant about face, right? And get her diet really cleaned up to where she was doing the protein 3 times a day, getting truckloads of good lower carb vegetables every day, getting physical activity every day. And we were able to get her to where she was cycling regularly. She's gone on to have 4 babies. And then a long gap. Her diet fell apart. She gained a whole truckload of weight again. And then after an 8-year gap, she conceived again. But partway through that pregnancy, she was diagnosed with gestational diabetes. Right? Very, very common with PCOS. So of course she came back to me and she said, what do I do? And I said, everything we did before, you're going to do it now, but now you've got to do it with even more focus. Now it's going to be, you go for a 20-minute walk after every meal. I don't care what else is going on in your day. You've got to be strict with your food, or you're going to end up with increasing the risk of, there's a significant risk with type 2 diabetes, gestational diabetes, of the baby dying in utero between 37 and 40 weeks. Right? It's a significant risk. It's why they often will induce a gestational diabetic mom at 37 weeks. And so I said, if you want to avoid all of that intervention and all of those risks, get this under control. And she did. She got it under control to the point that even while she was pregnant, she had reversed all of the symptoms of gestational diabetes. Her blood sugars were always totally in line. And she ended up with a vaginal delivery with no problems. All right. This is actually another one of my clients. We'll call her Sally. She came to me after she and her husband came to me together. Again, it was a case where they both came to every appointment, which was lovely. They've been trying to get pregnant for 3 years and it had no luck. Eyes don't change. Tessa, you are right. Eyes do not change. Not, when we clean up the diet, we don't see the eyes correcting. Not at all. Because this is the genes. This is telling us what the genes are. So when Sally came to me, she and her husband had been trying for 3 years. They'd been to the fertility clinic. The fertility clinic told her she had PCOS and type 2 diabetes. She was a petite little Asian woman. To look at her, you'd never guess PCOS or type 2 diabetes. Now, the thing we need to remember is that not everybody fits the textbook, right? So some iridologists would say, looking at this eye, that because we have this one marking here, that all we need to do is work on the ovary, but that's not the case. Some people would say that this meant she got parasites in her ovaries. That's absolutely not the case. This is not a parasite line. This doesn't say anything about parasites. And so what this did was it just let us know that there is an interruption in how the ovary wants to function. So we needed to then take a step back and look at the whole eye. Oh, look, she's got those rings in her eyes. So what supplements is she probably having problems holding on to? What nutrients? You remember, we've only done it like 17 times today. Give it to me in the chat box. What nutrients is she likely struggling with? Tessa, magnesium, calcium, B vitamins, and there's one more, Tessa. I want you to show off here. Vitamin C, good job. Fantastic, right? Now, seeing that and knowing that she has this diagnosis of PCOS and knowing that she has a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, I had to ask her, what did the doctor say to do about that? Nothing. The doctor gave you no dietary advice, none. So what did the doctor do? Well, the doctor gave me metformin and Clomid. Okay, we're not going to get into detail about that. She is a first-generation immigrant to Canada. She brought with her all of the high carbohydrate Asian things and put that with the absolute worst we have to offer. So breakfast was a sweet roll with a glass of orange drink, not even juice. Lunch was usually leftovers from the night before, white rice, a sweet sticky sauce. There might be some vegetables and a bit of protein in there, but lots of white rice with a lot of sweet sticky sauce. And supper was more white rice with more sweet sticky sauce and not much veg and not much protein. So we did a massive diet cleanup with her again. The protein at every meal, lots of vegetables, all kinds of stuff. We got her to where her blood sugars were perfectly balanced. We took her from her cycles being 90 days from start to start. That's an automatically infertile cycle. I don't care if you use metformin or not, or Clomid or not, either of those is not going to be any good. Right? We got her down to where her cycles were about 35 days. Now we've got a fertile cycle. We really kept working hard with her. It took them 18 months to conceive from when we started working together. It took us about 6 months from our start date to where we got her down to a 35-day cycle. 12 months after that to get pregnant. And again, she held the dietary work so well, and her husband was brilliant. When we first talked about diet in that first appointment, I just saw the look of devastation on her face. And it was like, how am I ever going to do this? And her sweet, sweet husband took her hand and said, don't worry. I'm going to take over all of the food preparation. You just eat what I cook and we will eat it together. It was so sweet. I was like, oh my goodness. I said to her, you should clone him. He's a keeper. Anyone who's willing to do that, such a keeper. Now, you'll notice that I never gave a diagnosis here, but with what I could see in her eyes, with what I knew about her symptoms, asking her, do you crave carbs? Oh yeah, favorite food, right? Understanding what her diet was like on an ongoing basis, I was able to recommend dietary changes. Then we were able to monitor the changes by monitoring her menstrual cycle. And then we were able to support her with her fertility to help her get pregnant. Most of us who do iridology as professionals are not licensed medical professionals, so we don't get to diagnose. We don't get to name diseases. I'm going to say that's not a bad thing, because research has shown, studies done at the Mayo Clinic show that a vast number of the diagnoses they make are incorrect. So if they give a specific diagnosis and they treat based on the diagnosis, they're giving the wrong treatment. Does that make sense? That's scary bad. You can look up research and see. I've heard everything from 25% of their diagnoses are incorrect to 75%. So you can do research and see what the latest research is showing. By not naming a disease, by focusing on symptoms, iris indicators, asking questions, and coming to our own conclusions, and then making recommendations, we can get so much further. We're not hemmed in by a tight diagnosis. All right, we've got a few more eyes to look at, but I haven't even introduced myself. So I'm going to take a minute to do that now. In case you're new to me, my name is Judith Cobb. I am an IPA certified level 3 iridologist. I don't have all, they've just started issuing badges, but I've been a certified iridologist for decades. I've been an iridologist, not certified, for 40 years, over 40 years, and certified for many years. I am one of only, I think there's only 9 level 3 certified iridology instructors in the world to date. I've been at this since 1979. I started out as a Jensenian iridologist. I became very unhappy with the way it worked because it didn't work. That's where I learned that eyes change, but they never did. Right. And so with that, that's when I jumped ship just over 30 years ago and started studying constitutional. I've had 8 different teachers in iridology alone, let alone the herbs and the nutrition and everything else, and learned 3 different styles. Have really, really worked in this. Tessa says, so much knowledge you can give to people. You're doing amazing. Tessa, thank you. One of these days, you're going to be ready for my course, right? Over the many years, I have written books that I've self-published. They're all out of print right now, except for the textbook that we use for the dynamic iridology program, and it is only available to my students. I've designed and taught many different courses on basic herbology for home use. I was a certified prenatal educator for many years, and certainly just love teaching everything I know to anyone who wants to work with it professionally. We'll talk a little bit more about the dynamic iridology course after we've done a few more practice cases here. I'm also a professional member of CAN-P and CAN-Pro, which are 2 Canadian nutrition associations, and the Alberta Herbalist Association. What I love about these organizations is it's not just to pay your dues and you get in. You've got to prove that you've got training, and then you've got to do CEUs every year to prove that you're keeping up to skill, keeping your skills up. And I love that. I love having my feet held to the fire because it keeps me fresh. And it means that I've always got up-to-date information to share with my students, which is a ton of fun, just a ton of fun. Okay, couple more cases here. A lot of my clinical work is actually with fertility. Now, that wasn't this young lady's case, but it would become eventually kind of thing. She was 20 years old when we first met, and her concern was she was gaining weight. She had been away at university in another country and did not like the fact that she'd gained 20 pounds in just one term. Did not make her happy. So looked at her eyes. And so what do we want to ask her? First off, generally, we want to ask her things like, When did the weight gain start? What's your diet like? Her diet was very high carb. She was eating in the campus cafeteria. What about your lifestyle? What do you do for activity? Well, she'd walk to class and back. And that was it. No other physical activity. All right. So, and her concern was the weight gain. Okay. But I want you to keep that tucked in the back of your brain. We've got those rings again. You're going to find these are really common. They're quite epidemic, right? Quite epidemic. I want you to look very carefully right here. And we've blown that up right here. Can you see there's a shadow? So we've got the light, and that would be this light casting the shadow. This light is shining over here. It shines on this fiber that is raised. Can you see that black shadow? Oh, yes. Okay. So the shadow is not actually along anything here. It's actually just a shadow. So what it is this particular fiber that's right here is literally raised up off the surface of the eye. So if this is the eye, that fiber is like this. It's sitting, it's raised up, lifted right off there. Okay. So if you're seeing, Tess, if you're seeing shadows, you need to ascertain, is it actually a shadow or is it shading? There's a difference. Okay. This, very, very difficult to see without really good camera equipment, tells us that she is inherently predisposed to, as in this is passed down from the generations. This tells us she has a strong predisposition towards adrenal imbalance and blood sugar imbalance. And it is not a tear. This is just lifted right up. It's the fiber did not stick to the surface of the eye. It's lifted off. Okay. So literally we're seeing a shadow there. And that's why we can see a little bit of something light in here, because that is the light coming from this direction, shining underneath that fiber and shining at that fiber. So underneath gives us the light band, and the light that's hitting this, the raised fiber, is giving us the shadow. So she's been gaining weight. We see this predisposition towards blood sugar imbalance. And we see that she's got these rings going around her eyes. So I asked her about her menstrual cycles. They're regular. Are they every 4 weeks? Well, they're usually 4 weeks late. So you're telling me your cycles are 8 weeks apart. Yep, that's what I'm saying. All right. And I'm thinking PCOS. Tessa says, is it only if the shadow is in this particular spot or just in general? It's not that there's a shadow there at all. The shadow is simply showing us that this fiber is raised off the surface of the eye. Okay, and it's the fact that this is raised off the surface of the eye that is making the difference here. Okay, as far as this case goes. As far as your son, we'd need to do a consultation to look at the eyes to determine what was going on there, right? So again, we've got the rings that tell us she burns through her B, C, calcium, magnesium. We've got this that is saying her body wants to have an imbalance with pancreas and or adrenals. And her menstrual cycles are 8 weeks apart. I'm thinking PCOS here, right? But I'm not saying that because I don't have the right to diagnose. And so what we did with her is we started talking about her diet and her activity levels. She's on another continent. She's going back to university on another continent. So does she have, in her apartment, does she have a kitchen? Yes. Can she prepare her own food? Yes. How close is the nearest grocery store? Oh, it's about 2 miles away. She's going to school in Hawaii, right? The weather's perfect there, from what I understand. Never been there, don't know. I'd love to find out. I'd love to have that firsthand experience, right? So I said, is it reasonable for you to actually walk to the grocery store twice a week to get groceries? Absolutely. All righty. Could you do this for breakfast, this kind of thing for lunch, this kind of thing for supper? Sure can. So we sent her off with that information. She's a student. I didn't even send her off with any vitamins. We just worked with her food. Divert the money that was going to the cafeteria to the grocery store. Let's get better quality here. Let's get things working out, right? And that's what we did to get her to balance out her blood sugars, to take the weight off, and to get her menstrual cycles down to that healthier range of 28 to 35 days. All right, another client, female again. Of course, my clientele are largely female, probably 90% female, right? I think that's pretty common for a lot of holistic practitioners. Another couple that tried to get pregnant for a full year. Again, I do a lot of fertility work. And so when we look at these eyes, we've got the frontal lighting, which hides the wrinkles, but can you see that there's a little bit of that creasing, those lines running sideways in her eyes? So we know BC, calcium, magnesium. And we know predisposed to some endocrine imbalances. Her diet was really good, really good. A few deficiencies, but everything was organic. Everything was from scratch. Shy on protein, not quite enough fat. So we had to work on that. Then we also had to talk about physical activity, which she was getting throughout the day. So with this woman, her cycles weren't long. Like she wasn't looking at a 45-day cycle. So not PCOS, but certainly not fertile. When I asked her about her menstrual flow, she said, it's just a smear on the toilet tissue. I don't even need a panty liner. Anyone else see a problem with that? Does anyone think that that suggests there's a hormone imbalance here? Do you think? Yeah, Julianne says, yeah, she's raised her hand there. Good job, Julianne. Love that. I agree. The doctors didn't flag that. They ran all the hormonal profiles and they said, you're fine, just go get pregnant. And it's like, well, it ain't working like that. Something's not right. So we did pump up her B vitamins because she's got these. We actually put on a really good prenatal vitamin that covered off her BC, calcium, and magnesium really well. And again, not saying she has PCOS because she doesn't have the symptoms of it, but knowing that her diet's deficient, we pumped up her protein, we pumped up her fat intake. It was a bit of a shock for her to think that she maybe wasn't eating enough calories and wasn't getting enough fats and enough of the right kinds of carbs. She was eating so low carb that there was nothing for her body to make cholesterol out of. So we had to kind of jack everything up a little bit. And she didn't get fat from that. Go us, right? She actually just felt really great. Her energy really perked up beautifully. And we got her to where she called me one day and she said, I'm having my period. I get really strange phone calls, just by the way. And I said, okay, so tell me what's going on. And she said, I have to wear a panty liner, right? And then we got her to where she actually needed at least a light pad, which was brilliant because it meant the endometrium was building up enough so that if an egg got fertilized, there'd be a place for it to burrow into. We were very successful in getting her balanced to where she did conceive and ended up with a beautiful baby boy. So we were very, very pleased with that. But again, the doctors had given her no indication about what was wrong, why she wasn't really having a menstrual flow, nothing like that. And everything that we see in here points toward, again, needing the B's and C's and the calcium and magnesium, but it doesn't give us all the information we need. There wasn't anything in there that said she needs more protein or more fats. That came from conversation, right? So we need the conversation. We need that. So with that, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? It leaves us never diagnosing from an iris photo. We're never going to name a disease, right? We're always going to use the iris photos in conjunction with the symptoms to guide the questions we need to ask to understand what we need to do, what we need to recommend for this client. Now, if you're serious about getting better at using iridology, or maybe you don't know it yet and you want to learn it, then I'm going to invite you to think beyond what you've seen on social media. Like that very first case we looked at where They were just looking at an eye and spouting information, or like so many teachers teach where they say one marking means one thing instead of this marking means this. That's how it impacts all of these other things, right? That's what I want to teach you. I want to teach you how to make the markings work together, how to understand how they work together, and then how to think through what to do with it. Iridology is a skill that requires practice and critical thinking, right? And to learn it well requires being mentored and being coached and being corrected if you're not on the right track, and support. It just simply does. That's to learn iridology well, you need all of that. So iridology is an assessment tool. Again, it points the way to the questions we should ask. It's not diagnostic. Going back to what I said at the beginning of class, if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know that I love to teach and mentor practitioners who are either struggling to use iridology well, or they just want to learn it. And I love working with my students to help them build that practical application kind of knowledge. So the dynamic iridology assessment system is coming up again. If you've already got a college level anatomy and physiology course under your belt, if you want to learn iridology at a professional level and you want to learn how the markers integrate, if you want to learn what questions the eyes want you to ask, if you want to learn how to create programs your clients can be more successful in implementing, if you want to be mentored for the long term, and I'm talking years, not just when you're enrolled in the program, then we need to talk about dynamic iridology. So Tessa is saying that's how I was taught. This marking means that marking means, this marking means this, that marking means that. I've learned more from your mini classes than I did in the classes I paid for, I think. It makes me sad to think that you paid for a class that only taught you one-to-one correlations. Makes me happy to know that you are now in my world, right? Dynamic iridology assessment system is the only live online fully mentored course for, and read this as anyone who's got a college level anatomy and physiology class already under their belt, and they are working with clients where they want to, and they want to be able to streamline their work without sacrificing client care. So many of the students who come to me are already in practice. They see the client, they gather information, they go off and they spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours creating a protocol, writing a fancy report to bring back to the next appointment, but they're not getting paid for those hours that they're spent writing the report. I teach my students how to do the assessment and the program creation while they're with their client in that paid session. And that works beautifully. It means that my students aren't working overtime and they're getting paid for every hour they're with their client. But it also means that the programs they're creating are step by step by step. We want to have long-term client compliance. I've got clients that have been with me since the beginning. They stuck with me through the Jensen years, bless their hearts, and they're with me still. And we're talking nearly 45 years later. They'll come in 5 or 6 appointments. We'll get them feeling great. They'll disappear for a few years. Something falls apart. They fall off the bandwagon. They need to come back in. I need to nag them a little bit for a few more appointments, get them back on track. They're feeling great. They disappear. So there's an ebb and a flow, but it's long-term retention. And I love that. The goal is to teach you constitutional iridology and how to use it confidently so that you can easily integrate what you already know about nutrition or herbology to confidently create doable client programs in your paid client sessions. So important, so important. Our next course is starting September 11th. Oops, that one shouldn't be there. It's just September 11th. Course class time, we meet once a week for 20 weeks from 12 till 2:30 Mountain Daylight Time, so whatever time zone you're in. And registration is open. I only take 10 students per class. So if you are thinking, this sounds good, or I want to know more, then I am going to suggest that you take advantage of the link I just posted in the webinar chat to schedule a time to talk with me. It's absolutely not a sales pitch. It's an opportunity for us to meet. Think of it as a campus tour to see if this is the course that you want to take, to make sure we could work together well, right? So important, so important. Tessa, have we done a call with you? No, not yet. Okay, we'll get to that soon. We'll get to that soon. Elaine Hedden, a master's in physical therapy, says, I'm a holistic physical therapist and I've wanted to study iridology for years, but just couldn't find the right instructor school. Judith Cobb's iridology course has been the perfect fit. The caliber and organization of the coursework is professional. Her depth and breadth of knowledge of her iridology, herbals, nutrition, and pathology is beyond most instructors and even some university professors. If you are a health professional wanting to expand your scope of practice by learning about the most up-to-date information on iridology, take the 20-week level 1, level 2 class is actually, and we call it dynamic iridology. It includes IPA level 1 and 2, just not in the order they want it taught in. From Judith, worth every penny, every minute. And so Tessa, right, we've been talking about your A&P and you're going to get there, right? That's coming up for you next to get that under your belt. Fantastic. So it's 20 live classes via webinar. That means you get to ask questions in real time, get answers in real time. Classes are recorded for playback on demand so that if you miss a class or if you want to review, it's there for you. We have extra group mentoring twice each month. So we have a webinar. Students and graduates, certified or not, it doesn't matter if they've been my student in iridology, they are welcome to come back to as many or as few of these group mentoring sessions to bring cases, to ask questions, to get support, right? So important to have that. Like you, I've done a lot of classes where when the class was finished, the door slams shut. And if you've got a question, too bad, so sad. I don't do that to my students. We have the student and alumni MeWe groups. So on the MeWe platform, we moved off of Facebook because Facebook likes to censor what we say. And we moved to MeWe because they don't censor us. And that's where we have our student and alumni group for having conversations about iridology, for sharing cool information, to talking about cases. So we've got 2 different ways to mentor and support beyond the classes. 225-page downloadable digital textbook, right? So you don't even buy a textbook. And I actually just did some edits on the textbook yesterday. All of my students, past and present, get access to the latest version of the textbook. Now, every time I teach, I think, I could make that section better. And so when I've got 3 or 4 sections that need a little tweak, I will do an edit and make it available. 45 pages of digital study notes. We call them the cheat sheets. Think of them as like Cliff's Notes or Cole's Notes or whatever you call the way you got through Shakespeare in high school if you didn't want to read the play. IPA certification mentoring one-on-one is included. A lot of iridology teachers charge extra for the mentoring. I don't. I include it in the tuition for a set length of time for my students. Case studies for certification prep as required by IPA. I will provide those to you so that you're not having to try to get photos and send me the photos, and I will just provide you with the photos and the case for you to do. So with all of that, oh, there's that mistake again. I really tried hard to make sure there were no mistakes in my slides this time around. There's always one that slips through. With that, again, I encourage you, if you don't have anatomy and physiology and you want to do iridology, reach out to me. I will send you a link to the anatomy and physiology class that I recommend. I don't get commission for sending people there. It's just a great course. And because it's a self-paced course, you could potentially have it done in time to enroll for September 11th, right? And otherwise, yeah, any questions about anything that we've talked about today? Anything you need more information on? I hope you've grabbed that link again so that you can schedule a time to chat with me and grab one of the first available seats in the September course. Right. Anything? Tessa says, no, not at the moment. Thank you so very much for everything. Yes, Tessa, you are very welcome. Are we all good? Julianne, Felice, small group tonight. This is always a small group. It's always an intimate group. I'm not bummed by that at all. People who show up are the people who are meant to be here. Okay, so it sounds like everything is okay. How much was it? Felice, we talk about the tuition in the meeting. So if you book a if you go to that link that I gave you, we can chat about tuition and payment options in there. And again, it's not high pressure. I just don't publish it here because if I publish it in this goes up onto YouTube. And if my tuition has to go up next year because inflation, because everything's more expensive, then people say, but you said in the video that it was this much. How come it's so much more now? It's like, well, that video was 4 years old, right? So that's why I don't publish the tuition here. Okay. And yeah, time change, watch your time changes here because I am Mountain Daylight until November and then we go Mountain Standard, right? So love to chat with you. That's all I've got for you. Tessa says, do you offer payment plans? Yeah, absolutely. We have a 5-pay payment plan. Yep, just to make it easier for students who want to get in. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. With that, my friends, thank you so much for spending some time with me this evening. I really appreciate that. I know that in the summer, there's probably a million other things you could do with your evening. So I'm grateful to you for being here with me today. And I really look forward to having those little chats with each of you to see if this course is a good fit. We will talk to you very soon. Take good care and bye for now.